there are many similarities and a few differences between public speaking and regular conversation. When I think about my presentations as if they are conversations, it gives me much more confidence, and I think it can help you gain confidence as well. When I first started teaching public speaking many years ago, I used a really popular book called The Art of Public Speaking by Stephen Lucas. The book author compares and contrasts presentations with everyday conversations that you have had thousands of times. And I've shared these same ideas with corporate clients, and I always see people instantly relax about it. They realize that they can use what they already know about communication and build on those skills when you're making your presentations. So I'll share the exact points from Lucas's book, and I'll give my own examples. And tell me in the comment sections that if by the end of the video you already believe you have some important communication skills that you didn't realize you had before. Similarities. First, both public speaking and conversation have organized and logical thoughts. When you're having a conversation with a friend, you will usually talk about a topic for a while, and then at some point in the conversation, you transition to a different topic. I was out to breakfast and coffee with a friend the other day, and for a few minutes, we followed this pattern. We talked about some of his writing projects that he's been working on, and then we talked about his new job. A few minutes later, we talked about some of my writing projects. We did jump around a little bit because it was a conversation, but for the most part, there were clear and organized chunks in that conversation. And public speaking is the same way. We have main points. We talk about point one, and after a few minutes, we transition to point two, and so forth. So both public speaking and conversation are organized to various degrees around certain topics or points. Second, for both conversation and public speaking, we tailor our message to our audience. We customize what we say depending upon who we're talking to. If I'm talking to my friend in a coffee shop, I will adjust my message so that it connects with his interests to some degree. If I'm talking to my mother on the phone, I might even talk about some of the same ideas, but I would express them slightly differently so they connect more easily with her interests. Most of the time, we don't even realize that we're doing this. We're having a conversation and we just naturally adjust and adapt to the other person. And we do the same thing in public speaking, or at least we should. I teach communication skills and leadership skills to college students, but I also teach them to corporate clients. And depending upon who I'm talking to in a presentation, I will adjust my message to their interests, their different ages, where they are, the different places in their professional lives, and the different pressures they have. And with a little bit of thought, I can dial in what I'm saying more specifically so that it speaks to their situation. So whether it's a conversation or a presentation, we tailor our message to our listeners. Third, we tell stories for maximum impact. When I was out to breakfast with my friend the other day, we both told numerous stories about what's been going on in our lives. We don't just spit out facts and bullet points. We talk conversationally and in a narrative way. And you'll notice that good public speakers do the same thing. They are storytellers. In fact, I'm doing it right now. I'm telling you about some experiences I had over breakfast. That's a story. It's true in public speaking situation. We might polish up our stories a little bit and make sure they get to the point, but the fundamentals are the same. We tell stories for maximum impact. Fourth, we adapt to listeners' feedback. If I'm in a conversation with my son or with my wife and they have a confused look on their face, I adapt. I try to explain it in a different way. I use an example. I demonstrate what I mean. Good public speakers do this too. When your listeners are nodding along and smiling, this feedback tells you that you're on track. But if they look confused in their faces or if they're asking each other questions, that's feedback that I would adjust to. I might ask them if they have a question, or I might see that look on their face and try a different explanation to see if it makes more sense to them. And the point of looking at these 4 clear similarities between conversation and public speaking is to hopefully build your confidence that public speaking is not an entirely new skill for you. You have communication skills that you've been doing your whole life in conversations that you can build on. Now let's talk about some of the differences. This will help you make further improvements on your public speaking. And we'll talk about the 3 differences that Stephen Lucas talks about in his book. The main theme that I see in these 3 differences can be summed up with the word polish. First, public speaking is more highly structured. I mentioned earlier that both conversation and presentations are organized and logical, but when you're preparing for a public speaking message, we typically are more deliberate about our structure. For example, most presentations have an introduction, body, and conclusion. And within each of those parts, we usually make sure we hit specific points. You often hear public speakers use signposts like first, second, third, so your audience can keep track. Now, we don't do that in a conversation because we're there mainly to build connections and relationship. In a presentation, there's a lot more information and content that we need to pack in so that every sentence adds value, and it can be overwhelming. So it's even more important to stay organized as the speaker. So we're more highly structured in presentations for the benefit of our listeners. The second difference is that public speaking typically requires more formal language. For giving a speech that's designed to inform our listeners, for example, then we're likely to have specific terminology and concepts that we're trying to convey. In a conversation, we might use lots of slang or informal expressions. In a presentation, we might be speaking to a professional audience, and we would probably polish up our language a little bit to make sure it fits that situation. In most cases, we work this out naturally as we prepare our content and practice several times. We tend to find the right words as we prepare and look for ways to make our message stick. And the third difference is that public speaking requires a different method of delivery. Public speaking usually involves standing up in front of a room. I might dress a little nicer. I might speak a little louder so my voice projects to the back of the room. I stand up a little straighter. I'm always a little more conscious of filler words like, you know. It seems that standing up in front of people is the primary ingredient that makes people more nervous. That's one of the reasons why I practice presentations at home with this approach to delivery, almost like it's a dress rehearsal. At home, I wear professional clothes. I stand up as I practice. I project my voice. I pretend that I'm talking to a group. And when I finally show up on the day, I just give that presentation one more time. And that practice really reduces my anxiety and makes me feel more confident. Now you can tell me in the comments section below if you already feel better about your public speaking potential after watching this. You have lots of communication skills that you've developed in thousands of your previous conversations. You can use these skills in your public speaking and build on this foundation just by adding a little bit more polish. Thanks for sticking around to the end. God bless, and I will see you next time.